game over. James Clapper flipped. What he just told Trump is the smoking gun. Former DNI James Clapper said again in an interview with Chuck Todd on NBC Sunday that there is literally no smoking gun evidence of collusion between Trump and Russian state actors. What Clapper says next should shock everyone. This is the smoking gun that blows the whole Trump case wide open. Watch below. James Clapper, full one-to-one explosive interview with Chuck Todd.
Back as questions continue to swirl about the Trump transition team's communications with the Russians, we're going to walk through the timeline of when specifically all of these events took place, because we have learned more through at least out the month of December of 2016. It was on the 1st or the 2nd that we now know Jared Kushner and Mike Flynn met with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak to reportedly discuss setting up a system of back-channel communications between the Trump transition and the Kremlin. For what reason? That's in dispute. Later in December, Kushner meets with Sergei Gorkov, the head of a sanctioned Russian state-owned bank. The bank was sanctioned, not the individual. On December 29th, calls take place between Flynn and Kislyak, allegedly to discuss the new sanctions that the Obama administration had issued against Russia that day. Those sanctions were in response to Russian interference in the election. Well, joining me now is the former Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper. Mr. Clapper, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Chuck.
Before I get into the rest of the story, you just heard Secretary Kelly talk about the leaks that took place. We know the UK complained about the Manchester bombing, and he referred to some of these leaks that they sort of walk up to the line of treason. Some might say, hey, they're just leaking out something that they think the public should know. Where do you draw that line?
Well, I think, first of all, I have to say that leaks are damaging, they're corrosive, they risk compromising sources, methods, and tradecraft. As we've seen recently, they damage relationships with crucial partners. You know, UK and Israel come to mind. And this is particularly serious now because, in my experience, 50 plus years in intelligence, I don't know of a time when we depended more on friends and allies for sharing information and intelligence, particularly with respect to terrorism. So I know Secretary Kelly takes this quite seriously, and he should. You know, legal definition of what's treason, I'll leave that to the lawyers, but just from a practitioner standpoint in the intelligence business, leaks are bad.
All right, let me go through the issue that has been the bombshell this weekend, this issue that Jared Kushner, at the time private citizen, yes, a private advisor at the time to the president-elect, was having these meetings with the ambassador to Russia, Sergei Kislyak, and they hid these meetings from public eye. We also learned that he met with the head of a sanctioned Russian bank. You were still the Director of National Intelligence in December. Are these things that you would have known?
Well, yes, they would have. And just to reinforce John Brennan's former Director of Central Intelligence Agency, his comments before the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, and I have to say that without specifically affirming or confirming these conversations, since even though they're in the public realm, they're still classified. But just from a theoretical standpoint, I will tell you that my dashboard warning light was clearly on, and I think that was the case with all of us in the intelligence community, very concerned about the nature of these approaches to the Russians. If you put that in context with everything else we knew the Russians were doing to interfere with the election, and just the historical practices of the Russians, who are typically almost genetically driven to co-opt, penetrate, gain favor, whatever, which is a typical Russian technique. So we were concerned.
And this is what's likely triggered the FBI's now extra attention to Jared Kushner, that we've been reporting that they believe he has more information. They're saying he's not a target. It would have been intelligence like this that would have triggered it?
Well, I think so. And I think John alluded to his his concerns that he expressed to the FBI, which is the proper channel. I have to say, you know, at the time I left, I did not see any smoking gun certitude evidence of collusion, but it certainly was appropriate for, given all the signs, certainly appropriate for the FBI to, and necessary for the FBI to investigate.
Sergei Kislyak, the Russian ambassador to the United States, there's been different ways people have described him. Does the intelligence community believe he basically is an agent of the KGB, or the FSB, the old KGB?
Given the fact that he oversees a very aggressive intelligence operation in this country, the Russians have more intelligence operatives than any other nation is represented in this country. Still, even after we got rid of 35 of them. And so to suggest that he is somehow separate or oblivious to that is a bit much.
Why didn't we kick him out? Why didn't he specifically get sanctioned? If he basically is viewed not as the ambassador to a country, not as a diplomat, but as basically the American head of an intelligence agency, that's sort of what you just described.
I'm reflecting an intelligence perspective. You know, we're paid, intelligence people are paid to be suspicious, and of course whether to expel people or declare them PNG is, at least in the last administration, was an interagency determination. And so what we did do is get at 35 of the more notorious intelligence operatives and ask them to leave quickly.
One of the caveats in the Washington Post bombshell story was that the Russians frequently will do misinformation, even in intel channels. How often does that happen? How likely is it in this case? Well,
it happens a lot. It happens overtly and covertly, and certainly that was one of the tools that the Russians used in the run-up to our election, was fake news, misinformation, paying trolls to insert phony information in social media. And so this is a standard practice of the Russians and the Soviets before them.
If Jared Kushner's meeting with somebody that you referred to as sort of oversees a large intelligence operation, and while you said you didn't see any smoking gun on collusion, how close to the line is that in your mind?
Well, it certainly arouses your concern about what's going on. Given you know, Russia, at least for my money, is our primary adversary. They are not our friends. They are in to do us in. And I have to say as well, Chuck, we have a kind of a time-honored custom in this country that we have one president and one administration at a time. And oncoming administrations don't get a head start before the end of the current president's incumbency.
What would you like to see? What's the appropriate action now that you would like to see take place against Russia? Is sanctions enough at this point?
Well, I think really not for me to say what happens now. I think certainly sanctions are a compelling, powerful weapon. The Russians don't like them, and I think what the actions the last administration took, the sanctions and other actions on the 29th of December, I always thought of as a first step. And I haven't seen any change in Russian behavior anywhere that would merit a relaxation, and if anything, an increase in those sanctions, as we've learned more about, and more has become public about what they're going to do. And as I said at the Senator Graham's subcommittee hearing on the 8th of May, they are only emboldened. They're going to continue to interfere in our political process, and that, to me, that's the big story here, and what American people should be concerned about.
James Clapper, I have to leave it there. The former Director of National Intelligence, somebody I think people are getting used to. You're almost going to be referred to as a member of Congress. We see you up there.
Oh, I hope not.
Yes. Anyway, Mr. Clapper, thanks for coming on and sharing your views. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Chuck.
When we come back, much more on the Russia investigation, plus Republican Greg Gianforte, who infamously body slammed a reporter won that congressional race in Montana, but the Democrats closed.
James Clapper said he had the same concerns with former CIA Director John Brennan and claimed his dashboard warning light was clearly on. Well, this just repeats there is no Russian collusion. James Clapper also did an interview on May 14th in which he said there was no proof of collusion. John Brennan said that the Russians have tried to interfere with our elections since the 1960s. This is not new news, folks. This Russian collusion story is a fake news story to distract from all the alleged spying that Obama did. Share this if you are tired of the deep state attacking Trump. Yes, we are. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching.